Hi guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today is part 2 of the Ted Bundy murder case. So if you want to watch part 1, please click the link to go view that here. Then once you've watched that video, come back to this video to watch the second half of the case. Anyway, let's get into the second half of the Ted Bundy case and what happened after his first arrest. On the 16th of August 1975, Bundy was arrested by Utah Highway Patrol Officer Bob Haywood in a Salt Lake City suburb. Bundy was driving his Beetle, it's always a Beetle, and fled after seeing Haywood's patrol car. Searching the car, Haywood found a ski mask, a second mask fashioned from pantyhose, a crowbar, handcuffs, trash bags, rope, an ice pick, and other items. Bundy played these off somehow, stating that the ski mask was for skiing. He'd found the handcuffs in a bin and the rest were household items. However, Detective Jerry Thompson remembered a similar suspect and car description from the Duranch kidnapping the previous year and Bundy's name from Clover's phone call. So just a reminder, Clover is a long-term girlfriend of Bundy. Inside Bundy's apartment, police found a guide to Colorado ski resorts with a checkmark by the Wildwood Inn and a brochure that advertised the Viewmont High School play in Bountiful, where Kent had disappeared. Police did not have sufficient evidence to detain Bundy, so he was released by pledging money or a reconnaissance. It's later said that searchers missed a hidden collection of Polaroids of his victims, which he destroyed after he was released. However, there is something good that did come out of this. He was placed on 24-hour surveillance and Clover was interviewed. She told them that before Bundy moved to Utah, she discovered unexplainable objects in her house and in Bundy's apartment. These included crutches, which I'm sure reminds you of his earlier murders, a meat cleaver that was never used for cooking, surgical gloves, an oriental knife, and a sack of women's clothing, which I'm sure just got bigger and bigger. Clover thought he'd been stealing due to his debt. When she confronted him over a new TV and stereo, he said, "If you tell anyone, I'll break your neck." She said Bundy became very upset when she considered cutting her hair, which was long and parted in the middle. She would sometimes awake in the middle of the night to find him under the bed covers with a flashlight, examining her body. Clover was then interviewed by homicide detective Kathy McChesney and learned of the existence of Edwards and her brief engagement to Bundy around Christmas 1973. In September, Bundy sold his Beetle to a teenager and Utah police immediately impounded the vehicle. FBI technicians found hairs matching Campbell's body and hair strands microscopically indistinguishable from those of Smith and Duranch. In October, detectives put Bundy into a lineup and Duranch immediately identified him as Officer Roseland. Not only this, but witnesses recognised him as the stranger at the Viewmont High School auditorium. Finally, we're getting somewhere. Bundy denied knowing Duranch but had no alibi. Even so, he was freed on a $15,000 bail paid by his mummy and daddy. He spent most of this time between indictment and trial living in Clover's house. In November, the 3 principal Bundy investigators met in Colorado and exchanged information with 30 detectives and prosecutors from 5 states. Officials left the meeting, later referred to as the Aspen Summit, convinced that Bundy was the murderer they sought, and they agreed that more hard evidence would be needed before he could be charged with any of the killings. In February 1976, Bundy stood trial for the Duranch kidnapping. On the advice of his attorney, he waived his right to a jury due to the negative publicity surrounding the case. In the end, the judge found him guilty of kidnapping and assault. Thank the Lord. In June, he was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in the Utah State Prison. In October, Bundy was found hiding in bushes in the prison yard carrying an escape kit. This included road maps, airline schedules, and a social security card, and as a result, he spent several weeks in solitary confinement. Later that month, Colorado authorities charged him with Campbell's murder. So it's not looking good for Bundy at this point. Escapes. On the 7th of June 1977, Bundy was transported from the Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs to Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen for a preliminary hearing. He'd elected to serve as his own attorney and as such was excused by the judge from wearing handcuffs or leg shackles. I don't understand that. During a recess, Bundy asked to visit the courthouse's law library to research his case. While shielded from his guard's view behind a bookcase, He opened a window and jumped to the ground from the second story, injuring his right ankle as he landed. After shedding an outer layer of clothing, Bundy limped through Aspen and then hiked south onto Aspen Mountain. He then broke into a hunting cabin and stole food, clothing, and a rifle. The next day, Bundy left the cabin and continued towards the town of Crested Butte, but he got lost in the forest. For 2 days, he wandered aimlessly on the mountain, missing 2 trails that led downward to his intended destination. This is honestly something out of a film. This is actually insane. On the 10th of June, he broke into a camping trailer on Maroon Lake, taking food and a ski parka. But instead of continuing southward, he walked back towards Aspen, eluding roadblocks and search parties along the way. 3 days later, he stole a car at the edge of an Aspen golf course. As he drove back into Aspen, 2 police officers noticed his car weaving in and out of its lane and they pulled him over. He'd been a fugitive for 6 days. As his own attorney, Bundy had rights of discovery indicating that his escape had been planned. It's just insane. Just speaking for himself. Back in jail, Bundy ignored the advice of friends and legal advisors to stay put. The case against him, already weak at best, I just don't know how, was deteriorating steadily as pre-trial motions kept going in his favour and evidence was being disallowed. He could have served another 1.5 years for the Durant conviction and then go free, which would have dissuaded other prosecutors from further prosecuting. But Bundy assembled a new escape plan because he just can't handle the fact that he's in jail. He acquired a detailed floor plan of the Garfield County Jail and a hacksaw blade from other inmates. I don't understand. How is this happening? He accumulated $500 in cash, smuggled in over a 6-month period by visitors such as Boone. During the evenings, while other prisoners were showering, Bundy sawed a hole about 1 square foot between the steel bars in his cell's ceiling. This reminds me of that film. Cannot remember the name of it right now, but I'll pop it on the screen. Having lost 35 pounds, he was able to wriggle through and explore the crawl space above. Multiple reports from someone who detected movement in the ceilings during the night were not investigated.
Say what?
By late 1977, Bundy's impending trial had become celebrity news in Aspen, and Bundy asked to be moved to Denver. On Christmas Eve, the judge granted the request, but to Colorado Springs, where juries had historically been hostile to murder suspects, which I think is fair enough. On New Year's Eve, Bundy piled books and files in his bed, covered them with a blanket to simulate his sleeping body, and climbed into the crawl space. He broke through the ceiling into the apartment of the chief jailer, who was out for the evening with his wife, changed into street clothes from the jailer's closet, and walked out the front door. After stealing a car, Bundy drove out of Glenwood Springs, but the car soon broke down in the mountains on Interstate 70. A passing motorist kindly gave him a ride to Vail. From there, he caught a bus to Denver, where he boarded a morning flight to Chicago. Isn't it insane that someone who is under arrest or wanted or whatever could board a plane and not be detected? That would be impossible today, thankfully. Back in the jail, the crew on duty did not discover the escape until noon on New Year's Eve. That was more than 17 hours later, guys. By this time, Bundy was already in Chicago. Sounds like another case. Florida murders and rearrest. After Chicago, Bundy took a train to Michigan and went to a local tavern on the 2nd of January. 5 days later, he stole a car, this is becoming quite a theme now, and drove to Atlanta, where he boarded a bus and arrived in Florida. He stayed for 1 night in a hotel before renting a room under the alias Chris Hagen at a boarding house near Florida State University. Bundy later said that he initially tried to find legitimate employment and refrain from further criminal activity. And I don't really know if I believe that, especially the fact that he got a place near a university. Seems like his old patterns were just destined to happen again. He thought that he could probably remain free and undetected in Florida as long as he didn't attract police attention. But his job application at a construction site was withdrawn when they asked him to produce identification. He then reverted to his old habits of shoplifting and stealing money and credit cards from women's wallets left in shopping carts at grocery stores. Like, that is just such a random thing to do. That is such a random way of stealing. In the early hours of the 15th of January 1978, only 1 week after arriving in Tallahassee, Bundy entered the Florida State University's Chi Omega sorority house through a rear door with a faulty locking mechanism. At about 2:45 a.m, he bludgeoned 21-year-old Margaret Elizabeth Bowman with a piece of oak firewood as she slept, then choked her with a nylon stocking. He then beat 20-year-old Lisa Janet Levy unconscious, strangled her, tore one of her bit deeply into her left buttock and sexually assaulted her with a hair mist bottle. In an adjoining bedroom, he attacked 21-year-old Kathy Kleiner, breaking her jaw and cutting her shoulder, and then 21-year-old Karen Chandler, who suffered a concussion, broken jaw, loss of teeth, and a crushed finger. This just sounds like he's celebrating now that he's out of prison. Amazingly, Chandler and Kleiner survived their attacks, likely due to car headlights illuminating the room and frightening away Bundy. Tallahassee detectives determined that the 4 attacks took place in less than 15 minutes, within earshot of more than 30 witnesses who heard nothing. Bundy then broke into a basement apartment 8 blocks away and attacked 21-year-old Cheryl Thomas, dislocating her shoulder and fracturing her jaw and skull in 5 places. She was left with permanent deafness in her left ear and equilibrium damage that ended her dance career. On her bed, police found a stain and a pantyhose mask containing 2 hairs similar to Bundy's. On the 8th of February, Bundy drove to Jacksonville in a stolen university van. In a parking lot, he approached 14-year-old Leslie Parmenter, the daughter of Jacksonville Police Department's chief of detectives, identifying himself as Richard Burton Police Department. But he retreated when Parmenter's older brother arrived and confronted him. So this is the second time he's known about a daughter of a very important police officer. And I feel like it's too much of a coincidence. That afternoon, he arrived in Lake City. At Lake City Junior High School the following morning, 12-year-old Kimberly Diane Leach was summoned to her homeroom by a teacher to retrieve a forgotten purse, but she never returned to class. 7 weeks later, after an intensive search, her partially mummified remains were found in a pig farrowing shed near Suwannee River State Park. Forensic experts surmised that Leach had been before having her throat cut and her genitals with a knife. On the 12th of February, Bundy couldn't pay his overdue rent and suspected that police were closing in on him, so he stole a car and drove across the Florida Panhandle. 3 days later at 1 a.m, he was stopped by Pensacola police officer David Lee near the Alabama state line after a wants and warrants check showed his Volkswagen Beetle was stolen. Why is it a Beetle? He just loves a Beetle. When told he was under arrest, Bundy kicked Lee's legs out from under him and took off running. Lee fired 2 warning shots, then tackled him. The 2 struggled over Lee's gun before the officer finally subdued and arrested Bundy. In the Beetle, there were 3 sets of IDs belonging to female Florida State University students, 21 stolen credit cards, and a stolen television set. There was also a pair of dark-rimmed non-prescription glasses and a pair of plaid slacks, later identified as the disguise worn by Richard Burton Police Department. As Lee transported his suspect to jail, unaware he'd just arrested one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives, he heard Bundy say, "I wish you had killed me." Confessions. Shortly after trial, Bundy initiated a series of interviews with Stephen Mitchell and Hugh Ainsworth. Speaking mostly in third person to avoid the stigma of confession, he began to divulge details of his crimes and thought processes. Bundy recounted his career as a thief, confirming Clover's longtime suspicion that he had shoplifted virtually everything he owned. The big payoff for me was actually possessing whatever it was I had stolen. I really enjoyed having something that I had wanted and gone out and taken. Possession proved to be an important motive for rape and murder as well. Sexual he said, fulfilled his need to totally possess his victims. At first, Bundy killed his victims to eliminate the risk of being caught, but later it became part of the adventure. The ultimate possession was in fact the taking of the life, and then the physical possession of the remains. Bundy also confided in Special Agent William Hagmeyer of the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit. Bundy told Hagmeyer that he considered himself to be an amateur or impulsive killer in his early years, before moving into what what he termed his prime or predator phase. This predator phase was at about the time of Healy's murder in 1974. This implied that he had been killing well before 1974, although he never explicitly admitted to having done so. In July 1984, prison guards found 2 hacksaw blades hidden in Bundy's cell. A steel bar in one of the cell's windows had been sawed completely through at the top and bottom and glued back into place with a homemade soap-based adhesive. Several months later, Bundy was moved to a different cell after guards found an unauthorized mirror. Shortly thereafter, he was charged with a disciplinary infraction for unauthorized correspondence with another high-profile criminal, John Hinckley Jr. In October that year, Bundy contacted Keppel and offered to share his self-proclaimed expertise in serial killer psychology. This was to help in the ongoing hunt in Washington for the Green River Killer. Even though Bundy was interviewed, the killer remained at large for another 17 years. In 1986, an execution date of the 4th of March was set for the Chi and Meagher convictions. This was then rescheduled to the 2nd of July, and in April that year, Bundy finally confessed to the details of what he did to some of his victims after their deaths. He stated that he revisited Taylor Mountain, Ithaca, and other secondary crime scenes, often several times, to lie with his victims and perform sexual acts with their bodies until putrefaction forced him to stop. In some cases, he drove for several hours each way and remained the entire night. In Utah, he applied makeup to Smith's lifeless face and repeatedly washed Amy's hair. Bundy decapitated about 12 of his victims with a hacksaw and kept at least one group of severed heads in his apartment briefly before disposing of them. So less than 15 hours before the scheduled 2nd of July execution, the date was pushed back yet again, and a new date of the 18th of November was set to carry out the Leach sentence. In 1988, the 11th Circuit ruled against Bundy, and in December, the Supreme Court denied a motion to review the ruling. Within hours of that final denial, a firm execution date of the 24th of January 1989 was announced. So with all appeal avenues exhausted and no more motivation to deny his crimes, Bundy agreed to speak frankly with investigators. He confessed that he committed all 8 of the Washington and Oregon homicides for which he was the prime suspect. He described 3 additional previously unknown victims in Washington and 2 in Oregon whom he declined to identify if he ever knew their identities. He said he left Manson's corpse on Taylor Mountain but incinerated her head in a Clover's fireplace. Bundy also confessed to having committed numerous additional homicides, including several unknown to the police. So with him admitting to victims that were previously unknown to the police, a new ulterior strategy became apparent. He withheld many details, hoping to use the incomplete information to delay his execution. His attorneys did warn him against this, but he kept going. This new strategy was dubbed Ted's Bones for Time scheme and only motivated authorities to see him executed on schedule. Interestingly, in the cases where he did give details, nothing was actually found. So it sounded like he was out of new information but was desperately trying to give something in order to gain more breathing hours. Detective Matt Linville saw this as a conflict between his desire to postpone his execution and his need to remain the only person who knew where the bodies were, which does make sense. It made sense why they couldn't find these bodies, and it was his attempt to gain more time. When it became clear that no further delays would be allowed, Bundy supporters began lobbying for executive clemency. Diana Weiner, a young Florida attorney and Bundy's last supposed love interest, asked the families of several Colorado and Utah victims to petition the Florida governor for a postponement to give Bundy time to reveal more information. The absolute nerve of it. All family refused, rightfully so. The governor made it clear that he would not agree to further delays in any case. "We are not going to have the system manipulated," he told reporters. For him to be negotiating for his life over the bodies of victims is despicable. Couldn't have said it better myself. Boone, who we talked about in the first part, had championed Bundy's innocence throughout all of his trials and felt deeply betrayed by his admission that he was guilty. She moved back to Washington with her daughter and refused to accept his phone call on the morning of his execution. On the eve of his execution, he did also talk of suicide. Bundy rejected his last food and was executed by electric chair at 7:16 a.m. on Tuesday the 24th of January 1989. His last words were directed at his attorney Jim Coleman and Methodist minister Fred Lawrence. "Jim and Fred, I'd like to give you my love to my family and friends. Hundreds of travellers sang, danced and set off fireworks in a pasture across from the prison as the execution was carried out. Then people cheered as the white hearse containing Bundy's corpse departed the prison. He was cremated in Gainesville and his ashes were scattered at an undisclosed location in Washington state in accordance with his will. Conclusion. I knew that Ted Bundy had a very high murder count. I just didn't know about the multiple escapes and trying to delay his execution for so long. I also just don't understand the attraction with serial killers. I know it's a thing that some women find them attractive, and this case is no exception, but I just don't understand it. From the footage that I've seen, Bundy was a very skilled public speaker and knew how to present himself in a way that gained him the most amount of respect and sympathy that he could. It's just a shame that it took so long for him to be captured, which obviously wasn't helped by the unsubstantial evidence and also to the fact that he wasn't picked out of a lineup that first time. It's just sad that it resulted in more deaths and broken families. I really hope you enjoyed learning about this insane murder case. If you did like this video, obviously give it a like and do subscribe for more true crime videos and other creepy videos and conspiracy videos. But as always, thanks so much for watching and I will see you in my next one.